much for joining us on the podcast today, Tiara. So this is a bit of a juicy topic. I want to talk about rebellion generally. Why do you think we rebel, especially as teenagers?
I think that teenagers rebel because as we grow up, we're obviously under the guardianship of our parents. And I know personally for me, I went to a school where a lot of kids didn't have, as strict as parents as I did. So
Okay.
I rebelled because I was like, oh, my friends don't need to do it. Another thing is I think it's like having a sense of autonomy. As a kid, you think you're grown up and you think you're older
Yeah.
than you are.
Yeah.
So I think kids just want to gain that independence. Sometimes I think kids do it just to be annoying, like being an auntie myself and having two nieces.
You have two nieces?
Yeah. They're like babies. So my
Oh.
sisters are like not marginally, that's an exaggeration. They're a bit older than me. So the older one is 34 and the other one's 29. The older one has two kids. So I understand. I'm starting to understand, into their little minds, like why they want independence and maybe why they rebel by not eating and like not wanting to take a bath. So like,
Yeah, it's like an inherent thing from
It
the very birth.
is.
We don't want to eat unless somebody like spoon feeds us into the mouth.
Exactly. So I understand that like as like teens grow up, they want that sense of autonomy and they want to be independent. Sometimes they're just, being annoying, but I understand as a teenager.
So what kind of high school did you go to?
I went to a Anglican private high school.
Right.
I didn't even, they were fairly good towards the end. I didn't really have much thought on, such high schools or such environments until I was in year 11 or 12 when I kind of realized that my values were being challenged against an institution's, which feels weird to say now because I feel like I'm so far from it, being graduated.
Yes.
But yeah, I went to a high school that kind of, I don't think nurtured my values as much as I do.
Right.
Yeah.
And so was your first kind of experiences of rebellion in high school or at home?
I think my first real rebellion that I feel is rebellion is my experiences throughout high school, because I feel like I was a good child. I hope. I'm sorry, Mum. But I feel like I was a good child, but it wasn't until like year 11, year 12, that kind of, integral period where you're gaining all of this experience outside of school and starting to see the outside world just before you leave high school, that I was like, I think what I'm doing is wrong,
Right.
but I'm going to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were those values that you're talking about?
So they weren't values more so than they were like, so for example, I'm an activist, right?
Okay.
I started my career back in like 2018.
Right.
And I just started learning and educating myself. But it wasn't until like that end of year 11, beginning of year 12 timeframe that I was like, oh, I'm going to, get more organized, like join these organizations, learn more, start protesting. And I thought my school wouldn't bat an eyelid. They were like, oh, that's fine. Yeah, whatever. It wasn't until that I started organizing and speaking at them and that I started attending strikes and not going to school.
Right.
That they got really, they got quite iffy about it. Yeah.
Right. So what were the strikes that you were going towards, and what led you to those strikes? Because I don't know, in my high school, the most kind of thing I knew about activism or charity was, donating or organizing drives. It was all very school led. I didn't know how to find, or I didn't even know it existed independently out of school, those places and, those forums for those kinds of discussions. So what were the strikes that you attended and how did you find out about this stuff during high school?
Yeah, so I was really lucky pre-COVID times
Yeah.
to find these organizations like School Strike for Climate, all these youth-led organizations that besides donating and fundraising and bringing awareness, they actually protested. So one thing that I'm very passionate about besides human rights and mental health is climate change, because it is such an important issue in today's society, which is another reason why I love Modibodi, is because they're really sustainable. But the thing about climate change is that I have two nieces, right? I feel like I'm protesting and making all these little changes in my life because I at least want to try and do something, even though, it's the big corporations that should be implementing change. I want to do something to make sure that they have a sustainable future. So I started working in these youth organizations because I was like, oh, I can do this. There's a forum for me to go out there and speak my mind and tell politicians that there is a quite large demographic of kids that understand the situation, that want change, that want legislative change, that want, real change, that want you guys to take this seriously.
So when you started attending these strikes, what was the school's response? Like, how did they push back on you?
So I kept it quite hush-hush because I was like, oh, I didn't intentionally keep it hush-hush.
Yeah.
But I was
You just didn't need to bring it up, really. Like,
exactly. Like, I was like, this isn't something that I need to bring attention to. It's just extracurricular
something I want to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's stuff that I want to do outside of school. It has nothing to do with school.
Exactly.
And I was like, it was March, I can remember it very clearly. It was March 15th, and I sang at the strike, besides giving like a little speech. And I remember some people screenshotted my Snapchat story, sorry.
Right.
And I was like, oh, why are all these people screenshotting? Oh, yeah. And it was just a photo of me and the crowd.
Right.
So you could very clearly see I was at a protest with signs up. And I noticed that like 15 people screenshotted it. And I was like, oh, it's probably my cousins and stuff. No, it was like all of these kids from my school. And I was like, oh, like, and I was
yeah, you'd
like,
feel uncomfortable. Like,
yeah.
It's like, why do you need this saved to your phone?
Yeah, like I had 5. After I saw that there were 5 people, but then it progressively started getting more. And I was like, why are people screenshotting my story? And then I went to school, because this was on Friday. I went to school on the Monday. And a couple of kids were like, where were you? And I was like, I was at a protest. And they were like, oh, we didn't know that, we didn't know that you did that. Because I was fairly vocal in, like political debates in the classroom, or like socio-political debates in the classroom in like history, that were like, oh, this person in history did this and they were bad, but they still did good things.
Yeah.
Like, I was that one girl that just saw injustices and would say stuff about it, but I didn't want to be labeled as the social justice warrior.
Right.
So when kids saw me go to these protests, they weren't surprised, but they were like, oh, there she goes. It kind of floated around the grade. I think that as great as the school was, to me, as great as the staff were, there was a culture of conservatism in the grade.
Yeah.
That was very prevalent. And I know that there were very good kids in the batch, but they were just the worst ones, and the ones that, poked fun at me and were relentless towards me. They were the ones that came forward the most and said the most stuff. So what happened is, one day, a lot of my friends started not treating me differently, but they were like, you pick up vibes, right?
Yeah, people aren't stupid.
Yeah, like when you talk to someone, you can tell. And I'm very anxious about that stuff. Like, my best friends now, like, I get very anxious, and they're like, chill, it's fine, because I had like so much experience with these kids just like talking behind my back.
Yeah.
But what happened is, I think the principal caught wind of it somehow. I don't remember. I remember telling my PC teacher, like my pastoral care teacher,
right,
my year 12 mentor, my history teacher, and another teacher. And he caught wind of it, and he kind of was like, don't go to another strike ever again. You don't need to. You're gonna, like, you might get in trouble. Like,
did he say why you would get in trouble? Like, as in, it's like the students, or in trouble with the school body?
Well, he said that I'm not allowed to go, and that I might get in trouble if I go. And I was like, it felt wrong of him to say that, because there were literally dozens, if not like multiple principals that allowed their students to attend this protest. A lot of them wouldn't have even bat an eye. They would be like, oh, we live in a democracy, cool, you can go protest for climate change, that's something important. So I felt, on top of being completely ostracized by the students, my group, and as much as they tried to fake it with me, they were like, it felt even worse that like a teacher, like an authoritative figure was like, I don't approve of this.
Right.
And I knew that he didn't, and that kind of silenced me for a bit. Like, I didn't speak out in legal studies when someone said something out of pocket.
Right.
I didn't bring up things. I didn't call out injustices when I heard them. And there were a few like ignorant comments made here and there, and people would look at me like, oh, SJW, Tiara is going to say something. And I never did. From that point onwards, because I felt silenced, and that sounds weird, but it was bad at the time.
It sounds so, there's a level of like self-consciousness, something that you think is really great about yourself that is then turned around and made to be like, a why are you sticking your head out from the crowd? And you're just like, oh, okay, well, I won't do that now because the attention isn't worth it. I remember, this is so different, but I remember one time I had to sing. Somebody was like, dared me to sing, and so I sang. And they were like, wow, you made really weird eye contact with me that whole time. And then I was like, okay, well, I'll never sing again. Like, I was like, I don't want to make eye contact with people, so I won't sing. And it's completely irrelevant, but it's that level of somebody points something out and
it just shuts you down.
It shuts down that part of yourself. Yeah. And it's hard, I think. What makes me angry listening to you is that the school didn't step in and say, you know, it's not like you're wagging, like it's not like you're ditching school to do nothing. You're going to something that is educational and is, you know, above and beyond what can be taught in schools. It's life practice, it's life experience, and then not stepping in and being like, no, this is something that should be encouraged, because then you wouldn't have felt so alone. Like other people could have gone with you, for example. So when did you find your voice again? Did you find your voice again during high school?
It was really hard because there were a few students who were like relentless, like in terms of like making subtle comments under their breath, commenting on my posts on social media, sub-posting, you know, like with like, for example, this person posted on Facebook that people had been protesting climate change by doing something, like I think it was like sticking their heads in sand or something, or restricting themselves on the beach. And obviously people are going to make fun of that because if you don't understand the deeper concept, it sounds ridiculous. But people were like, those kids were like going in on me like, oh yeah, SJWs, people like that have no brain, blah blah blah. So I got called every name under the sun, so it was like really hard to find my voice. And around this time is when I was going through a really like hard period of my life. So like my dad had passed away, my dog got sick, all of this stuff happened, and I was like, oh, like I don't feel like this is my calling anymore. Like I feel like I've just been shoved out of my entire little activism sphere that like made me feel safe because I had like something, because my sisters are both lawyers and they're both like very social justice orientated. They're very passionate women. And I was like, something that is so like, that's something that resonates within my family, something that I can find talking points with and educate myself about, was just like cut off. And it wasn't until like I graduated and I found like such a good group of friends that they kind of helped me find my voice again.
Okay.
And that in conjunction with just leaving high school was just, it helped me realize that I have a voice. People disagree with you. People have varying viewpoints. That's always going to happen in the real world. And you can either like, you know, just lay there and do nothing about it, or you can take your experiences into account and you can learn from it and do better or be better.
I think what's hard in high school with rebelling is that the cohort is so much a group. And then when you graduate and you leave, you realize like you're suddenly just like, there's space, like there's actual physical space to move. Do you need to go like this?
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go do it. Go do it.
No, I thought I felt like a thingy.
Oh, okay.
A hiccup. I was like, no.
No, it's okay. I think the thing with high school is that there's this group and it feels like a lot of effort to move. Like you feel squished kind of and pushed and you can't do anything. And then you go outside of high school and you have the physical space to just like move around. It doesn't feel like rebelling anymore because there's nothing pushing against you. Whereas in high school, rebelling it's just tiring. It can be really tiring. And is that how you felt in school when you were organizing? Like, did you ever try to get support from within the cohort or within the classes, or was it purely just felt like it was you?
I knew that there were a few kids that support what I did, but they didn't, like, I don't know if they didn't say anything because of, you know, because I just was that activism girl, because, you know, the culture of the grade or whatever. But there were a few supporters, but it just never, like, they never were, you know, it never helped me in my activism. So I kind of went on it alone, like organizing, doing all of this myself within my respective cohort. I had, you know, the other volunteers and the other people within the organization that I actually formed really close bonds with, and I'm very grateful for, but I kind of went at it alone, which was annoying at the time, because like you said, when you're in high school, when you're stuck in an institution for that long, you kind of have to conform to whatever standard or mode that
just
it
to
operates
save energy.
on. Yeah. So I kind of realized after my dad passed away, which was like in June, I was like, I have to go back to school. I have to face all of these people. They're going to be so nice to me now that, you know, they understand my situation. Nice. Yeah, they're required to. If they're not, that's a bit effed up. But they have to now be nice to me. So I was like, I have to, like, go and face them. Put on, like, your fake mode. Like, just go fake. Be fake for the next, like, however many months that you're here.
Yeah.
The teachers were very supportive. So they were amazing. Like, my history teacher and stuff were amazing. But it's the students that I was so wary of, because they still had that underlying perspective and view of me and thoughts of me, even though I'd been through so much. And I went back to school and I just hung out with that one group of girls who were, in retrospect, lovely, but like surface lovely and
tolerable.
Yeah, tolerable. Like, they didn't care for me whatsoever.
Right.
But they were like, because I was just that SJW girl, but they were like, they were tolerable. So I blended to them. I got sick of some people towards the end, because I was like, I can't do this. Like, I'm just going to stay at home and study.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how I kind of got out of it. I kind of had to meld into the mold.
I think it's one of the things that I only learnt about protesting at university, and I get quite panicky in crowds. So it's something that I do, but I do with a lot of mindfulness for myself, in that I'll stay towards the back, or I will, you know, if we're sitting and we're listening to something, I'll sit not in the big, you know, the big thing in the middle. I'll just sit further away and listen, and because that's what I like about protest, is listening and hearing what other people have to say. And I think that's important about protesting and rebelling, is knowing, like, well, how much you can put into it, because you're not useful unless you're well in your being. Like, you have to be okay internally in order to contribute the most that you can towards any cause. Yeah. And it sounds like when you were in school, that's what you needed to do. Like, you needed a moment. And it's just sad that your teachers and stuff weren't supportive earlier on, that it didn't take you having a horrible family problem for them to care for you.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. Maybe they, like, yeah, that's how I felt, so alone. Like, there was one instance where I did tell a teacher and he was very supportive of it, but for the rest of it, I feel like teachers knew what students were saying, but they didn't really, like, do or say much about it, and that felt it felt terrible. It felt isolating. Yeah.
And can you describe, because you were talking about those new spaces off, like, the activism and the communities there, can you describe your first time going? Because I know that's a lot of fear. I remember for me it was drama, and I had to go to a drama school, and I didn't have any friends in my primary school. And the nerves, because I thought I was unable to be social. Yeah. Because other people didn't want to talk to me. Yeah. And so then I go into this new space and I'm like, I can't speak. I don't know how, like, what do I say? What do I do to make people like me? I'm inherently unlikable, etc. And then I got over this fear. How can you describe your first experiences of going into those new areas and how you built up your confidence in those areas?
Oh, it was so scary. It was so scary. I was like, these people barely know me. I'm just another girl here trying to, you know, effectuate change. Yeah. And I was welcomed with open arms. And I was so happy about that, because it was a complete contrast from my school environment. So, of course, it was scary. And, of course, one of the first protests that I actually helped with, I had to sing at. And I was like, oh. And there were 80,000 people or something like that. There was it ranged between, like, because I'm really bad at maths and I suck with numbers. I think it was between 50 and like 70, 80,000, between those numbers.
Right.
I'm getting confused between the two
I mean,
protests.
when you're in the double thousands, I don't think we're catching one by one.
Yeah, it was like something like that. But yeah, I remember it felt really foreign but great to be in a room of like-minded people. And my cousin, he's an activist as well, and I knew he was in the crowd, so I was like, okay, this is fine. I felt better. So it was just, I can't describe the feeling other than it was like euphoric. Like it was like you'd been drained for so long, and then you're put into an environment, people are so like-minded, so accepting, so happy to share like their knowledge and their experience with you, and to like have you in the room. It's just, it made me really happy. Yeah.
Okay, so finally, what are your tips for any young person who wants to rebel in the extraordinarily healthy way that you rebelled?
Don't let other people, if it's something that you're passionate about, don't let other people push you over or suppress your voice. It is very easy, especially as a young woman of color, to be pushed aside when you're in a room full of people. But if you want to raise your voice, especially if it's over something important.
Yeah.
Me going to, a predominantly conservative school, it was very hard for me to be progressive, and I felt like I was inconveniencing people by being like, oh, climate change is an issue.
Yeah. When climate change is the inconvenience, not you bringing it up.
Exactly. So my tip to you is raise your voice. And number 2 is, and this is the most difficult part, but I promise you can get there in the end, is surround yourself with people who love you and will listen to you and have that, mutual respective relationship. Because I can wholeheartedly say, if I did not have like the family that I'm blessed with, the best friends that I'm blessed with, and like the environment that I'm in right now, it's such a contrast from where I was this time last year. Yeah. And like, I know it sounds to, the kid that's watching this, that's like, oh, this is hard. I don't know how to raise my voice. I don't know how to rebel against whatever's being imposed upon me. Just explore, raise your voice, and be respectful of others is one thing. As a part of rebellion is being respectful of others, especially if it's like the safe rebellion, the my nature rebellion. Be respectful of others.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your advice and for sharing your story today.
Thank you for having me.